Turning down to our top story, of course, it is the Fed set to raise rates by a quarter percentage point again as it continues its fight against inflation. But with 3 U.S. bank collapses and a weakening economy as a backdrop, the potential for yet another rate hike is raising concerns. Here's what some people had to say about a coming recession.
If you read, what the Fed's saying and some of the other economists out there, I mean, they're saying it could be a soft landing, a form of a recession.
We do think we are probably heading into a recession at the back end of this year. There is likely to be credit tightening. There's some stresses ahead, commercial real estate and the like.
The artificially low interest rates we had for a long time, you're seeing playing out in Silicon Valley Bank today and First Republic and other institutions where they borrowed short and lended long.
Interest rates go up, the value of treasuries go down. Now consumers act.
Well, businesses and banks aside, economists remain divided on what the Fed's next course of action should be. With more, let's bring in Yahoo Finance's Jennifer Schonberger. And Jen, the focus here really is that expected rate hike, but really, will there be a potential pause on the other end of it?
Hey there, Kiko. Welcome back. That's right. The Federal Reserve expected to raise rates by a quarter percentage point as it fights inflation, but not everybody thinks the central bank should. The failure of regional U.S. banks, including most recently the fall of First Republic Bank, the second largest collapse in U.S. history, is raising questions among economists about whether a rate hike is warranted now. Paul Krugman says the Fed should pause since its argument for hikes is not being borne out by the data. He says, quote, "We haven't had an unemployment rise despite the Fed projecting unemployment of 4.6% by the end of the year," adding, "Why are we doing this?" Meanwhile, Ken Rogoff sees the Fed having to choose between higher inflation and a deep recession. He says the chances of a soft landing are getting smaller and smaller. His take, the Fed should just leave inflation hanging for longer. And Peter Orszag, former OMB director, says, quote, "There's no reason to do a rate hike this week," noting the pressures facing regional banks along with a drop in job openings are signs inflation will decline. But Adam Posen, who runs the Peterson Institute here in Washington, D.C., says it's important for the Federal Reserve to continue hiking rates given the latest data. PIMCO CEO Emmanuel Roman agrees with that, saying the Fed needs to fight inflation. Quote, "I think you need to fight inflation, and I think you need to hike rates. We expect the Fed to raise by 25 basis points and pause, but a pause doesn't mean stop, and it will be data dependent." Wise words there. A pause doesn't necessarily mean a stop. Akiko, all of this coming down starting at 2 p.m. Eastern here in Washington. Back to you.
And of course, all eyes certainly going to be on that 2:30 p.m. press conference. Jen, thanks so much for that.